It's honestly the little things I cherish the most. So like my morning coffee, seeing a family member, going on a nice walk by the lake. My name is Kate. I live in Hamilton, Ontario, and I'm 31 years old. When you come to the end of your life, you're not thinking about how much money you have or the houses you have or the car you drive, your possessions. You're really thinking about the people you love. I think I've learned that life is precious. Every day, I know it's cliche to say, but truly every day we wake up is a gift, and no day is guaranteed.
I see so many things today that I never thought would be possible. I hoped would be possible. I looked at it as a stretch goal, but I never thought it would be possible in my lifetime. And yet it's become routine. In the early years of lung transplant, we really just celebrated survival and got out of hospital. Now it's really, the focus is on not just longevity of life, but quality of life. Are they working again? Are they playing tennis again? Have you returned the person to a meaningful life after lung transplant? And that's, again, another luxury that we never dreamed we'd get to. The other day, I met a woman that had a lung transplant 29 years ago. Okay, she should have died in 6 months, 29 years ago. She finished her old career, she retired from work, she's a grandma, she's got family and grandchildren. It's like, who knew? UHN and the University of Toronto have had a culture of research and innovation, the culture of clinician scientists. Like, you see a problem and you don't accept that that's the way it is. We sort of say, how can we do it better? How can we define the care for tomorrow?
By 1983, there had been 44 attempts around the world at lung transplantation. None would be considered a success. On November 7th, 1983, our team performed a lung transplant on Tom Hall. He was to be the first long-term successful recipient in the world. I was certainly pleased that the hospital and Toronto, maybe the country, got some good publicity. I felt they deserved it. I was a brash American who came up to a very pleasant environment, which was very supportive.
I actually started at UHN, or walked through the doors of Toronto General Hospital, as a medical student.
He worked in my laboratory. He was always enthusiastic.
It was a pretty scary place at that time, a lot of intense people, but I also knew it was a great institution where a lot of great things were happening. I got to participate in the first double lung transplant in the world, and it was a life-changing experience. The image was a patient with their chest open and both lungs gone, like no lungs in the chest. I mean, that's certainly a point of no return. Still then, lung transplant was very difficult, very risky, but he honestly believed that it was possible.
She had been babysitting, and she was coming home. I think I had just come back from work, or anyway, I pulled in the driveway and I saw her walking down our street, and she was stopping to catch her breath. And so that's when I first started asking my wife, Jean, about, did she notice anything?
I knew something was wrong. I don't think I realized the extent of it.
It took a while before we actually knew what was wrong, but we could tell by the severity of the acts that the staff at Sick Kids took from when we arrived at Emerge to her going up into the intensive care unit the same day.
I was 15 when I was diagnosed with pulmonary veno-occlusive disease.
He told us the only thing that could save her would be a lung transplant, but that the wait lists, on the average were a year or better for pediatric patients. So we were sitting there and, we're in shock. And then he said maybe just a few months to live.
The lung transplant program had gone to a great height. And then, as part of my research and my master's project, we had developed the lung preservation solution called LPD that really became the standard worldwide. And to me, that is still one of the biggest achievements because we made lung transplantation safe. With the success of lung transplantation, all of the leaders in lung transplant got recruited to other American centers.
Tom Todd went to Ottawa. I went to St. Louis. Bob Ginsberg went to New York. And Alec Patterson I recruited to St. Louis. It was very unfortunate. There was a real dearth here.
The lung transplant program really was in danger of becoming extinct. I became director of the Toronto Lung Transplant Program, I think in 1997. The research lab had dwindled down to about 2 people. And so my objective one was to get back to being on top.
We're at home and my dear wife was scared out of her mind.
It's a sensation of being breathless.
She was not in good shape and she was on oxygen and she couldn't walk. She had to use a little chair to get back and forth to the bathroom. She was frightened, but we still sat on the couch together and we watched hockey and we talked and, listened to Taylor Swift. My older daughter, Heather, she just grabbed her mattress and dragged it downstairs, and Katie slept on the couch and Heather slept beside her.
I think the oxygen helped for a while. When the oxygen, I was on maximum and that was it. I think that was a pretty scary feeling. The end stages of my disease, there was a lot of fainting.
She collapsed.
I remember being rolled out into the ambulance and the fireworks were going off.
So did you say fireworks going off?
Yeah, because it was Canada Day.
I know that Dr. Kashavji had many opportunities. This place would not be what it is in thoracic surgery if he hadn't, through personal sacrifice and persistence, stayed and kept things together.
The one really important thing I learned from Joel was the concept of redefining the care for tomorrow. What's not possible today, we will make possible in the future.
My first day with UHN was July 1st, 2005, as a research fellow in the thoracic surgery laboratories. We met and he said, I'm interested in gene therapy, and I think to do that, the only way is if we can maintain these organs at normal physiological temperatures and conditions after the lung is retrieved.
Can we genetically modify lungs to work better after transplant?
So he showed me a room with pieces of plastic and some tubes and pumps. And he said, you have to work with this and make a system that would maintain these organs for 12 hours. And so you can start working on that tomorrow.
At that time, it was still a priority that we can't do more transplants if we can't have organs to transplant.
Most of the time when people are donating lungs, they've had some catastrophic health event.
Worldwide, especially even in North America, only 20% of donor lungs are actually used for transplants. Most of them are not perfect, and clinicians err on the side of conservatism. Like, you don't want to take a risk, you don't want to harm a patient. So in many ways, the decision is made not to transplant. Now, many of those lungs are good.
Can you tell at this point if they're in good shape or not?
Yeah, so when we get them, we generally once you see them and feel them, you have a better idea of how they are. These ones so far look pretty good. Once you put them on the system and you start perfusing them, then you'll find out more.
Ex Vivo Lung Perfusion is a platform that you can actually keep a donor lung once it's removed from the donor body. Instead of putting it just in a cooler of ice, as has been traditionally the case, you put in this device that keeps pumping a fluid through the organ and keeping oxygen through the ventilation, and also keeping at 37 degrees, which is the normal temperature of a body. And by keeping those conditions, like physiological conditions, you can not only assess better organs, that in the past we would say, well, they don't look too good, I think I'm going to decline, but actually provide some treatments to reverse that injury.
EVLP has doubled the number of lung transplants performed per year at Toronto General Hospital. But not only that, it's starting to do the same around the world. And that really has opened the door to the whole future of regenerative medicine, of reparative medicine, of personalized therapy for the organ.
And there is routine normothermic perfusion now of hearts and livers and some kidney as well. The field has really exploded now.
Anytime you're struggling to breathe, I would just say extreme discomfort. I've never experienced a drowning, but that's what I would imagine drowning on land feels like. I think I still had a lot of hope, even in the last kind of moments of we were still hoping.
It's something that we as Canadians don't tend to say very often, but the Toronto Lung Transplant Program is by far #1 in the world in many aspects. We do over 200 lung transplants per year, and there's no other program in the world that has ever achieved that mark. The second thing is our operative mortality is 1.8%. That's extremely low. When you think about it, when lung transplant started, the operative mortality was 50%. More importantly, it's #1 in innovation.
I know my dad was in the hallway having conversations about giving me morphine to help me die without suffering. But I don't think I was at an acceptance kind of stage.
Katie's a very good example of thinking things through. Katie had primary pulmonary hypertension, and that means that the lung arteries have a high pressure in them, and ultimately the patient dies because the heart just cannot pump across those lungs anymore. So theoretically, it made sense that if you could put a tube from the right side of the heart to the left side of the heart so that the heart could pump around those lungs, the patient should survive that and could be bridged to a transplant for a while that way. But it had never been done before.
There was something they could try, but it was experimental, and that they hoped they might be successful. So they wanted to put her on an artificial lung.
In Katie's case, she was dying, like they were doing CPR on her. We were able to put an oxygenating shunt from her pulmonary artery to her left atrium so that her heart could pump around it and her heart could get the oxygen and bridge to her transplant. I mean, to this day, there are still people that think, like, how is that possible? And we showed that it is possible. She was the first teenager in the world to receive a novel lung. She's quite famous world round because we often show a picture of her surfing 6 months after her lung transplant. And so she's known as the surfer girl. The other important lesson from Dr. Cooper is the concept of sorting out as a clinical problem in the research laboratory and then translating it to the bedside. The research lab here has grown from 2 people to 140 people working lung transplant research.
We have 2 other projects I would like to highlight. One is the preservation of organs at 10 degrees instead of preserving on ice. And the second one is the isolated lung perfusion to treat cancer in the lungs. The 10-degree lung preservation is probably the most exciting innovation in the field after ex vivo lung perfusion. It preserves the organ better, so you have less injuries to the organ after you put in the patient. And second, we moved the window we had to preserve lungs from 6 to 8 hours maximum. Now we can go to 24 hours. Now basically we have no geographic limitations for retrieving organs. What we envisioned here was, could we actually use the ex vivo technology that now we know we can perfuse lungs for several hours? Can we actually use that to treat the organ with high-dose chemotherapy or other anti-cancer agents in a way that actually only the organ is treated and it doesn't go to the rest of the body? So we don't take the lung out, but we isolate the lung from the bloodstream of the patient. We have already performed this procedure in 21 patients, and we're doing about 1 to 2 a month now, and we're having very promising results.
This is decellularization of mouse lung. Basically, we're going to remove the cellular content.
The mantra in our research lab now is, can we make a lung that'll last forever?
The research is what drives us forward. I think the most exciting times are when we do get these pretty precious samples from the operating room.
The median life expectancy after a lung transplant is about 6 years. So that means if 100 people were transplanted today, in 6 years we'd expect about 50 of them to have passed away. Extending that is a major priority.
The fact that we are setting up a first phase 1 trial for chronic rejection is very exciting.
So we may be able to extend survival to an average of 7, 8, or 9 years within the next decade.
The idea of genetic modification of lung grafts to reduce the immunosuppression required, I think, is really the next major landmark that we need to achieve. With respect to the donor organ shortage, obviously the goal is to try and create new organs, not from deceased human people. One of the options that we're looking at right now is to take animal organs and to decellularize them or wash out all of the cells until all we're left with is the scaffold. That scaffold can then be repopulated with cells, ideally cells from the recipient themselves that would be not considered foreign to the recipient and hopefully maybe transplantable without the use of immunosuppression. But I do think it will be in the next 5 years.
I would like to see the day that when a patient receives a lung transplant for end-stage lung failure, they never ever face lung failure again.
Drones are a fantastic kind of future of transplant because really what they allow for is a very sort of planned and green alternative to the current process of organ transportation. Currently, organs are transported by teams of individuals using Learjets, flying across the province, flying across the country. We're limited by aircraft availability, airports, whereas drones offer the exciting possibility of flying from point A to point B at regular intervals and just going directly from the donor hospital to the recipient hospital. Regulators know that the future of aviation is going to be centered around autonomous flight and drone technology.
In September of 2021, we transported a lung by drone for lung transplantation and successfully transplanted it. Using our technology for lung preservation and concepts, we developed a carbon fiber box to protect the lung, and United Therapeutics helped to design drones that were safe, that, if the engine was cut, a ballistic parachute would fire, so the organ would come down to earth slowly. It's very hard to fly a drone in a populated city. There's a lot of radio frequency interference that interferes with the GPS of a drone. And so we sorted out all of these issues, and the video of that first drone transfer was watched by 1.5 billion people.
For the first time in the world, a drone was used to deliver human lungs for transplant.
And I saw that it had my lungs in it that were coming. That was just amazing to see on video.
It's the result of a collaboration between U.S. company United Therapeutics and Canada's University Health Network.
We want it to be clean energy, so these drones are all electrical drones. They have a limited range at this point in time. So as technology improves and we can get transcontinental clean energy drones, then we'll be able to pick up a lung in LA or Vancouver and bring it home for transplant.
Well, you must feel as though it's a whole new lease on life then after the health problem.
Sure is. All the things you dreamed of, all the things you really dreamed of doing, you thought maybe I'll never get a chance to do them. Now they're all possible again. It's just like a whole new life given to you.
Yes.
In later years, I often asked a transplant recipient, how much time do you want? How much time do you want free of this breathlessness? Someone would say a year, some would say 6 months, and one person said, 1 day. Give me 1 day of normal breathing, and it will be worth it.
Laura Donahoe, I'm a thoracic and lung transplant surgeon. I actually came here for the first time as a third-year medical student on elective, and what brought me here was the lung transplant program. It was 2007, and I remember I was here on Valentine's Day, and Dr. Kashabji was doing a lung transplant. I sort of started to look around, and I saw that it was mostly men who were doing transplant surgeries, and so I asked and realized that there were no women, and so it did make a bit more of a challenge for myself, that I thought that this was something I really wanted to do. I felt very supported all the way through. I really wouldn't want to work anywhere else. Our team feels that pride, knows the history, and I think we truly still feel it to this day. It truly is incredible to see how much lung transplant has changed over the years. It truly has become one of the routine surgeries we do here, which is amazing.
When I look at him today, I'm so proud. Not that I can claim any credit. Toronto today, I can tell you, when I see the research that's going on, when I see the Mars Institute, when I see the volume of lung transplants going on, when I see the quality of research, I never would have believed it.
My name is Bo Wen. I'm the Chief AI Scientist of UHN. The utility of donor lungs are extremely low, as low as 20%. In order to improve the situation, we developed this algorithm called Inside X, and What we did is we trained this algorithm using a lot of historical data from EVLP machines that are performed in UHN. And then we're trying to identify important variables so that we can improve the donor lung utilities. What we found is that experts like Dr. Shaf Kajaviji have extremely high utility rates, as high as almost 60%, 80%. And doctors outside of UHN, even though they use the same EVLP machines, they may have very low utility rate. What we hope we can develop almost like a virtual copy of Dr. Shaf Kajaviji's brain so that we can learn his expertise and teach it to the AI system so that we can deploy this AI system to all over the world so that any expert who uses EVLP will have a very accurate assessment of donor lung qualities. We can also train the virtual chef AI algorithms with additional resources such as thousands of literatures that a chef cannot understand by himself. And with additional source of knowledge, this AI algorithm can one day exceed the knowledge of Dr. Shaf Kajaviji.
Like a super chef.
Like super chef.
This is all because UHN has pushed the envelope. This is all because of organ donation. I don't know, I guess I feel like I won the lottery. She'd do anything for Shaf. She would, and for those nurses, and you know, it's a team effort.
Second slate, take one.
UHN is just home to so many world leaders in surgery, and they're just regular people to us. They're part of our family and we call them by their first names.
Sometimes you don't think about the big picture and everything that's being accomplished.
We have access to an unparalleled biobank of human specimens from our lung transplant patients. And really this allows us to investigate disease processes in humans that might not be possible anywhere else. 40 years from now, I would like to see lungs that outlast their recipients.
Nothing is impossible.
They'll undergo a procedure which is much more of an elective, scheduled procedure. Probably it will take a few months to do the workup.
I do think that 40 years from now, we will for sure look back and say, can you believe that in 2024, they used to just take a lung out of someone and transplant it into someone else without modifying it? Like, how barbaric. So I think we'll be transplanting lungs that are modified and optimized for the patient, transplanting lungs that are more a known product with a known and predictable outcome, like getting a new hip. Now, you know, I think a competing technology is lung repair. Can we actually put ourselves out of business and say you never need to replace a lung because we can repair the one you've got? And I think that's a very important part of the future of what we're doing. So I think that'll be a competing technology and probably in the long run, the one that'll win.